Green Spring. Today is Friday, April the 24th, and this past Wednesday, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. Now, it was a bit different than any other Earth Day. It was marked by the fact that everyone's staying at home. So there were a lot of streaming events. There were a lot of concerts. There are still streaming events going on now for days on end. A couple of the websites that were really involved in this Earth Day were earthday.org, nasa.gov, and earthdaylive2020.org, I believe. And they had a lot of content that they were sharing with the world, and we wanted to collect a bit of that and a little bit of our own and give you a look at Earth Day 2020.
The place? A little-known planet called Earth, and it was a bustling place. In the United States alone, 1970 saw the Kent State shootings, the advent of fiber optics, the song Bridge Over Troubled Water, Apollo 13, the Beatles' last album, the death of Jimi Hendrix, and the meltdown of fuel rods in the Savannah River nuclear plant, an incident not acknowledged for 18 years. It was into this world that Earth Day was born. Its founder, Gaylord Nelson, a United States Senator from Wisconsin, had the audacity to propose the first nationwide environmental protest. Although it was a roll of the dice, it worked. At the time, massive V8 sedans were sucking up leaded gas at every station, and industry coughed up smoke and sludge without fear of legal action or media attention. Therefore, air pollution was also commonplace, and environment was merely a word heard in spelling bees rather than on the news. Earth Day 1970 changed all that when 20 million Americans took to the streets, parks, and auditoriums to demonstrate for a healthy and sustainable environment. The movement's national coordinator, Dennis Hayes, organized coast-to-coast rallies featuring thousands of students protesting the destruction of the environment. Topics included pesticides, oil spills, toxic dumps, and loss of wilderness, just to name a few. The result was a rare political alliance where both Democrats and Republicans, rich and poor, stockbrokers and truck drivers, tycoons and union leaders enlisted their support. The day gave birth to the United States Environmental Protection Agency and the passage of the Clean Air, Clean Water, and Endangered Species Acts. Senator Nelson was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor. 20 years later, in 1990, Hayes took Earth Day to a new level. He took it global, mobilizing 200 million people across 141 countries. Earth Day 1990 gave a huge boost to environmental issues worldwide and helped pave the way for the United Nations Earth Summit in 1992.
From the International Space Station, I am NASA astronaut Jessica Meir, observing with all of you the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. During my stay here on the ISS, one of my favorite activities was to look out of the window and admire our beautiful home planet, taking a moment to appreciate the extraordinary diversity of ecosystems and life in Earth's cradle. This year marks 50 years of a concerted effort to protect our fragile environment and conserve the natural balance of Earth's interconnected systems. Using that knowledge to live sustainably on our home planet, protect life around the world, and adapt to natural and human-caused changes. NASA space exploration continues to inspire us to be better stewards of our planet. The iconic 1969 Apollo 8 Earthrise photo of Earth appearing over the moon's horizon helped unite a generation into appreciating the fragility of Earth. As NASA returns humans to the moon and eventually beyond, views of our home planet from these space explorers will continue to amaze and inspire the world. We must maintain our efforts to go forth sustainably as responsible stewards. Congratulations and thank you to all those supporting and protecting our Earth on this 50th anniversary of Earth Day.
There's enough ice here in Greenland to raise sea levels by 25 feet all the way around the world. It's an incredible amount of ice, and it's melting and adding to sea level rise. For oceans melting Greenland, what we really want to do is measure the oceans, measure the ice, and watch them change together year on year, and try and answer the question, how much are the oceans melting away the ice, as opposed to the air, which is what most people have studied so far. It's really a breathtaking landscape. These giant mountains and canyons are all along the coast. When you look out the window, you really get a sense of just how huge these glaciers are, these gigantic rivers of ice that are draining the ice out of Greenland into the ocean. And then they reach the ocean and it gets all broken and craggy and big chunks fall off. It's incredibly dramatic. Kulasuk is just a tiny little town in southeast Greenland, and we've been launching probes out of here for the past 4 or 5 days. It's already been a fantastic year for OMG measuring the oceans. We launch them right out of this tube right over here. Open up the tube, you can look right down it and see the water passing by, or sometimes the icebergs or clouds or whatever it is we're flying over. We slow down a little bit and we just push these big gray cylinders out of the bottom of the plane, and they fall to the ocean and measure the temperature and salinity when they get there and radio it back to the plane. We're really trying to look at the ice and ocean all the way around Greenland. So we're dropping 250 profilers. We're going to cover the coastline all the way around. And in the spring, we map out the glaciers with a radar, also all the way around. So we're really looking at mapping all of the ocean ice interactions in Greenland as best we can with one mission. What we care about with OMG really is the breaking off at the edges. As the water eats away at the ice, then it can actually speed up that breaking off part. And when you dump more ice in the oceans, then it causes sea level rise. So OMG is really here to try and figure out how much are the oceans doing, how much is this kind of breaking off of the ice, it's called calving. How important is that relative to the melting at the surface? And more importantly, is the ocean causing some of this speed up of the calving? We think it is, but how widespread is it and how big an impact? Even the smallest iceberg looks gigantic when you're right next to it. We saw an iceberg that was grounded in the bay. Remember, 90% of the iceberg is below sea level. So if there's about 10 meters or about 30 feet of ice above sea level, then 300 feet are below. It's a reminder that a lot of the stuff we're trying to measure is hidden below the surface of the ocean, hidden below the surface of the ice, and peering down into both of those is really at the core of what OMG is trying to do. Every time a ton of ice comes off of Greenland, sea level goes up a tiny little bit, and it's coming off Greenland at billions of tons per year. It's interesting to meet some of the Greenlandic folks who have been here their whole lives. They've all watched the glaciers literally vanish before their eyes. They didn't need satellites and airplanes and scientists to tell them that Greenland was melting. They, look out and see the glacier used to be here and now it's way up there. Sea level rise is really a global problem. It's something we can't just ignore. 2/3 of the planet are covered by the oceans, and it's really the same ocean. I mean, if ice is lost here, sea level rises back home in Los Angeles, rises in Southeast Asia, in Australia, all across the planet. Being here and seeing the ice disappearing and literally watching it fall into the ocean is really profound, and I think it's something that I hope that we help people understand with OMG, that we all live on the same planet and it's changing and we need to know how.
On April 22 of 1970, 20 million Americans, at the time 10% of the total population of the United States, took to the street to demand a healthy and sustainable environment in a massive coast-to-coast rallies. Thousands of colleges and universities organized demonstrations to support our planet and demand action. The first Earth Day demonstration was born 50 years ago and remains the largest civic engagement event in human history. That event forced Congress to take action, and most of our environmental laws were passed with bipartisan support. Among them, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, and the Endangered Species Act. Also, this demonstration led to the creation of the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. And it is truly my honor to talk to the students that organized the first Earth Day 50 years ago and created this powerful movement. So please welcome Denise Hayes, Barbara, Alexander, and Stephen Huff. Thank you all for being here with us, and thank you for your wonderful contributions to our planet. And what led to these demonstrations?
Well, part of what was going on at the time was a period of great unrest by college students and many Americans to protest the Vietnam War. And there was also a growing sense of unease and upsettedness with what was very visibly, obviously, as significant pollution of our air and water. Events such as oil spills on the beaches in California, haze and smog in Los Angeles, the actual river flowing through Cleveland caught fire as a result of pollution and toxic chemicals in the water. So a growing number of Americans were concerned, and Senator Gaylord Nelson of Wisconsin decided that it would be a good idea to focus attention on this, and his way of suggesting how that would happen was to use the teach-in methodology that the Vietnam War had initiated several years ago. So he thought and helped raise money and helped organize an office headed by Dennis. And the rest of us flowed in from various episodes and locations and experiences and helped generate a lot of activities for Earth Day 1970.
Well, that was a monumental task, Dennis. Could you tell us how was the process of organizing so many people together on the same day and following the same cause?
Well, of course, in 1970, we not only didn't have social media, we didn't have cellular telephones, we didn't have computers, we didn't have the internet. It was comparatively difficult. We managed to develop a methodology of placing something that was broadcast. We would get covered by magazines, by newspapers, by television shows, and remarkably, a number of reporters were willing to, and editors were willing to permit them putting our address and our telephone number at the bottom of the story. So these broadcasts would go out to broad swaths of the population, and those who were interested in what we were trying to do would write back to us. We would then, with a very primitive technology, type their names and addresses into addressograph cards that could be spun through a machine and would address envelopes when they're hand cranked, and then we would bring in a bunch of volunteers, fill up 50,000 envelopes full of newsletters, and send them out, and slowly built from a very small base up to about 50,000 activists who were actually committing to do things across the country.
Well, when you look back and 50 years ago, where we have advanced when we talk about environmental issues, and how do you see the movement today? I would like to start with Barbara.
You know, we really have had incredible progress. The dirty air that was in existence in 1970, the dirty water in our rivers and streams flowing through all of our major cities was terrible shape. And the federal laws that we adopted federalized the requirements to clean up our air and water, and it made a tremendous difference. We had an objective of reducing the pollution from automobiles by 90%. Well, that didn't happen in the deadline that we originally proposed. But the tremendous increase in the reduction of pollution from automobiles in this country is something that is well worth pointing to as progress. But what I think is happening now is an awareness, as Dennis correctly said, of the international implications of continuing to pour carbon emissions into our atmosphere. That is a focus that doesn't have any power to change, except country by country. And I'm looking back at what happened with the Clean Air Act. The reason we got the Clean Air Act enacted was that it imposed federal minimum standards on all the states, who individually, just like countries today, couldn't possibly regulate polluters in their own state, because those polluters would threaten to leave and go someplace else where it would be cheaper to make their pulp and paper, their automobiles, or their chemicals. So the feds had to step in, and that was the genius of those acts, is that they created a national minimum standard, which was very high compared to what was happening in the field at the time they were adopted. And we don't have the authority to do that at the international level. It's the source of a good deal of frustration, particularly when the United States is leading the way to doing nothing incrementally to help solve this problem.
Yes, absolutely. And the second polluter of all our planet. Dennis, what advice would you give today to environmentalists and the people that are concerned about the well-being of our planet?
Well, I think, as Steve suggested earlier, we were the students then, but nobody handed us a torch. I mean, we reached up and grabbed the torch. And I think it's time now for the next generation to answer that question. We're happy to consult with them. We're happy to try to pull out our generation, which now often has some people who are near retirement or past retirement, have some assets, have some time on their hands to form a gray-green alliance with the youth of today. But I suspect that as with virtually every movement, the anti-war movement, the civil rights movement, Tiananmen Square, the uprisings in Arab Spring, the current uprisings in Hong Kong, they are all led by youth who are full of energy, full of idealism, and have not yet learned what it is impossible to do. And so they just go out and do it.
is Jenny Motter, and I'm the art director for NASA Science. For many years, I've been creating the Earth Day posters for NASA, and each year I try to focus on a new perspective, whether it's the 2017 total solar eclipse, the Earth as the shore of the cosmic ocean, or discovering our roots in the depths of astrobiology. I attempt to illustrate our home, our place in the universe, from the unique vantage of NASA. This year, being the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, I wanted to do something really special. But first, I'm going to talk about my inspiration. Last year, I read a book about trees that really inspired me. We see trees all around us every day, but I never imagined how much we have in common. For instance, if you hold a stethoscope to the trunk of a hardwood tree, you can hear its heartbeat as water and nutrients move through its system. And most astonishing is the relationship that trees have with fungi. Tree roots attach to fungi underground, which not only allow them access to more water and nutrients, but enable them to communicate with each other for miles. In 2018, Swiss scientists discovered voltage-based signals in these networks, similar to our nervous system. These signals allow trees to send warnings of drought, disease, or insect attacks to neighboring trees. It's really quite amazing. So this was all very inspiring, but how could I relate it to NASA's unique perspective? I was talking to a colleague one day, and he said, "A river delta looks a lot like a tree from space." And that was a light bulb for me. From there, I started doing more research and found this great metaphor by James Hutton, the father of modern geology. He described Earth as a superorganism, comparing the water cycle to the human circulatory system. Basically, the heart pumping blood through our veins. This brought it full circle for me. A tree as a river delta with the Earth's metaphorical heart pumping water through its natural circulation system. 3 metaphors in one composition. So, back to wanting to do something really special. Since it's the 50th anniversary, I wanted to try something that I'd never done before, to paint the Earth Day poster. I've been a painter since I was a kid, and it's what led me to study art and design in college. I began by drawing the Delta tree on a 15 by 30 inch piece of watercolor paper. I found a bunch of satellite images and started to paint, mostly making up details as I went along. The final artwork made for an interesting illustration, but for me, something was missing. The make-it-up-as-I-go approach didn't quite capture the NASA aspect that I'd hoped for. So I went back to the digital drawing board and started compositing the detail with actual real science data. Another first for me. I mostly pulled imagery from the Landsat series of missions, which NASA operates in conjunction with the United States Geological Survey. My main resource for the Delta was taken from my all-time favorite Earth as Art image, the Lena Delta in Siberia. But a variety of other images were also used in the composition, from a desert in Southern California to the lakes of Western Mongolia to the very tip of South America. Imagery from all over the world adds details to this composited illustration. Can you find these images along with the hidden animals in the river delta? To download the 2020 Earth Day poster, along with these activities and posters from past years, visit science.nasa.gov. Thanks for listening, and remember that we are all part of the superorganism that is Earth.
I hope you enjoyed our featured programs.